Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Changing Room podcast. I'm your host, Arbela, and this is episode 12. I'm so excited for you all to hear today's episode. I spoke to Alysse Delassandro, who is a local Cleveland influencer, blogger, and vintage shop owner here in the Cleveland area. I actually spoke to Alysse a little while back for Cleveland Magazine about her amazing, loud, bold, and as she describes it, gaudy style. So I'm so excited to have her on and for you all to hear her input on all things fashion, plus size inclusivity, and everything in between. And yeah, so this was an amazing episode and I hope you all enjoy it. Hi, Alysse.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here on the Changing Room podcast. This is our 12th episode, I think. Maybe I'm miscounting, but I'm so excited to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And yeah, so let's just jump right into it. And I always warn everyone before the episode, but my first question, which maybe sometimes impacts what you end up wearing if you want, but my first question is always, tell me about your outfit. You know, what are you wearing? What's the story behind it?
Of course.
Any tidbits?
I appreciate you gave me a heads up about this question.
Yeah.
And not that I dress boring every day, but it is a Monday that we're recording this, and perhaps I would have dressed more Monday, but I tried to dress more like Friday, Saturday, Sunday every day. So this is kind of a jazzier outfit, and I really love like bright colors and just standout statement pieces. It's hard in the winter because you have to have a jacket that like matches your outfit. Mm-hmm. But I remembered that I had this pink fur coat and I really wanted to wear this like vintage 70s poncho. So I was like, okay. And then I was like accordion. And I got my holographic combat boots on and I was just like, it's a moment. It's bright. It's me. I'm very like more is more. So this felt like a good reflection of my style. And since we were going to be talking about that, that's kind of how I put it together was just like, I started with just the poncho and then kind of built from there. And that's usually how I get dressed. I pick one thing I want to wear. It could be earrings, it could be shoes, it could be a jacket, and then I just build from there. That's how I get dressed.
I love that so much. Yeah, it's such a gloomy day today, and when you walked into the studio, you just like brighten everything up.
That's
it was
the
like,
goal. That's
you're
the
like,
goal.
and I love that. I wasn't expecting anything less.
Thank you.
And yeah, so that's a vintage two pieces, or
yeah. So I'll take my jacket off just so you can see.
I
but
love
it's
the
like
colors
it's like a poncho.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
And I love the pleats, the accordion pleats like that.
Right.
They're so cool.
And it's probably not my size, to be honest. It's probably meant to be more oversized, but I'm kind of like, if it fits, I'm wearing it. I don't really care.
Oh, it works.
So I'm making it work kind of like a little, slimmer fit than it was intended to be, but it works.
Yeah.
And then, it's I like maybe in the summer, I wore this paired with like a bright orange like skater skirt and I tucked it in and it was super short, but I'm like, well, it's winter, so let me style it a little bit different. But I kind of don't believe in seasons so much. I'm kind of like, if I like it, I'm going to figure out how to wear it with whatever the weather is doing. So
it's just layering.
Exactly.
It's just the magic of layering.
Exactly.
And that makes it more sustainable too. It's like, I feel like we're always told like in the winter, in the fall, whenever the seasons change, like, okay, time to get a new wardrobe.
And to switch your wardrobe.
Yeah, to get a whole new closet. And it's like, no, we can just work with what we have.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I love that. Well, is there anything you're kind of gravitating towards right now? I know, so I chatted with you back in 2020 about your personal style for Cleveland Magazine, and it seems like your style has definitely still very colorful, very like still very you and loud, and I love it. How would you but is there anything specific you're kind of like exploring at the moment? Trends or styles, anything specific?
Yeah, I think right now I'm really I've always been like a rainbow girl. Like I always have really loved like traditional Roy G. Biv rainbow. Yeah. And right now I'm really gravitating towards like lime green and pinks and oranges, but not neon, but like close to neon.
Yeah.
And I've been really gravitating towards that lately, which doesn't necessarily go with my rainbow aesthetic. So I'm like, okay, this is a little different, but I've been really like loving lime green. I would say that's probably like my color of the year.
Yeah.
Which I'm wearing
I love that.
But like it's definitely like the color of the year for sure.
Yeah. Lime green is so fun. I think I saw on your Instagram you were wearing like a lime green
tracksuit. Sweatsuit.
Yeah.
And that was so funny because I was going through physical therapy and I just was like, I really have this philosophy that if you dress up and you feel better, you just feel better when you put clothes on that make you feel like you. Yeah. And so I was only 5 days past or 10 days, I think, into my physical therapy. I didn't have the energy to really get dressed or I couldn't go up the stairs very well. But I was like, you know what? This sweatsuit is bright. It's lime green. It's colorful. It makes me feel good as I can while I'm recovering from knee surgery. And it did the trick. Just even wearing that color, even though it was still comfy, got me feeling better. So I think clothes can be really transformative in that way. And even a color can be that way.
Absolutely. It's kind of I've heard that thing where it's kind of like a psychological thing where if you are in a bad mood, smiling, just physically smiling, as annoying as it feels at first, will actually put you in a better mood. It will kind of up your dopamine a bit. And I feel like that's the same with they literally call it dopamine dressing.
Literally, yeah.
You wear just something that to you feels like you, or something just kind of is just very explorative and cool and expressive, and you feel like yourself. And I think that's also important for anyone going through, health things. And I know a lot of us went through that during COVID.
Right.
I remember when I had to switch to, working from home, I went through a complete identity crisis for a little bit. I was like, what am I supposed to wear? How am I supposed to get dressed? And I've only recently started reaching that kind of equilibrium of okay, here are some ways I can turn my style into my work from home style and feel like myself. Because I'm and I needed to rethink that, because otherwise I was like, I'm just gonna wear my PJs every day, and that cannot happen.
Because
I will feel horrible. And it's not. And I realized it wasn't necessarily because people were seeing me, because they weren't. I was having one meeting a week, but I was like, this is for me. I just need to feel better.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely have my comfy clothes that I wear at home, and if I need to run an errand, I'll run an errand in comfy clothes, but I feel my best self when I am dressed loud and dressed ready to stare,
Yes, exactly. And I love that. And okay, and then what are some of your biggest style icons or inspirations? Any you want to highlight?
My mom and my aunt are two of my biggest style inspirations. Just growing up in a loud Italian American family in the late 80s, early 90s, it was all about big hair, big earrings, red lipstick, big bold patterns, and I still gravitate to those, to that same aesthetic that I saw growing up. I still gravitate towards those things. So definitely love that kind of gaudy, in your face, unapologetically loud style that the women in my life, maybe that's not how they would describe it, but that as a kid, that's how I saw their style. It was very loud and bold, and I just admired that so much because I was super introverted as a kid. But the one thing I always felt really confident about was my ability to dress. So even if I couldn't express myself verbally, I felt like I always had something to say. I just always said it with clothes instead.
Yeah, I love that. I was definitely a shy kid as well. And I think I was I wanted to explore more kind of colorful and interesting outfits, but I would always overthink it from the sense of what would people say? What would people say? And when I started letting go of that, into middle school and high school, I was I started feeling so much better about that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that your inspiration is from these strong, amazing, cool women from the 80s and 90s. I can literally envision them in my head. And I just think that's so cool how a lot of times our relatives from different generations impact our personal style.
Absolutely.
Now. I know my mom's style, specifically in the 90s, really impacted me. The 90s is probably one of my favorite eras. And it's just so cool because then I wear some of her stuff to this day, and she's just is that really coming back now? And I'm just I just like it. It just speaks to me for some reason. It's so funny. No, and I remember you talking about the word gaudy during our last interview, and I really like that because usually, what does gaudy mean to you? Because I feel there's other people's definition of what it is, but I like how you kind of flip it on its head a little bit.
Yeah, to me, being gaudy is not being afraid to wear something that is a little bit strange and outrageous and outlandish, but when you wear it, it kind of just makes sense. It's tacky, but it's not cheap. It's gaudy to me is really statement pieces. To me, gaudy is what we now call dopamine dressing, is what I always defined as gaudy.
Yeah.
So there's a new term for it, but to me, it's just always been gaudy.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I lost my train of thought really quick. But yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think it's just like, it's so interesting how there's these different definitions for different terms and like, well, you know, this is negative and this is bad and this is like, you know, and I just love that about you that, you know, I think more people are waking up to the fact that there's just like no rules at the end of the day that you need to follow.
There's no rules. And like the sooner that you realize that, like the more fun you're going to have with fashion and personal style. And I remember like as a kid, like I said, I loved fashion as a kid. And I remember I had this book of rules of like things that you couldn't do. You couldn't wear navy with black. And you couldn't wear socks with sandals. And I had all these rules. And I'm like, would I do some of them today? Maybe not, but I'm like, I'm ripping the rule book up anyways because sometimes socks with sandals does look great, right? There's sometimes where like I'll wear socks with like Crocs and I'm like, this is incredible, right? So like, I think like it's all about, there's no rules. It's really more about how you use your creativity to kind of break those rules and make them work for you.
Yeah. And another thing I've noticed, I mean, is just that like a lot of these rules that we're taught are often around like body image and body sizes. Like, oh, if you're this body size, I feel like the word flattering is being finally kind of broken down and like rejected as it should be. Like I've been seeing it a lot on TikTok and just younger people talking about it. It's like when people say like, well, that's not flattering on you, what does that exactly mean?
I love that that's a TikTok conversation because as like an elder millennial, I'm like, we've been talking about this in the body positive community. That's something that I've been talking about since I started in 2012 is this idea that this word flattering is really just a way to police people's bodies, particularly plus size women and larger bodied people. But it's really about policing. And it's about, when something is flattering, it's about making yourself look as small as possible. So if you're wearing something like I am right now that's a little oversized, that's not cinching in the waist, I'm not looking as small as I could be. So it's not slimming, it's not flattering. But I believe that if it feels good to me, that flatters me. So it's flattering to me. So I think it's a really good examination. I'm glad to hear. I didn't know that conversation was happening. I'm glad to hear that because I had, and perhaps, I don't know if we talked about this when we talked last, but so Ready to Stare, my business, started as a handmade jewelry and accessory brand, and I expanded into clothing as well. And so I designed a dress in 2016, and it was called the cupcake dress because you literally looked like you were just sitting on top of a cake topper. And it was the definition of not being flattering. It was just this big dress, just gave you so much volume. And it went viral because people were really mad about it. They were like, how dare you, plus-sized person, wear this dress that makes you look bigger? It had 10 yards of tulle in it. I mean, it was a bit, I'll have to send you a picture of it. It was a beautiful dress. And at that time, no one was making anything with volume because we were still really in this idea of like, you have to dress your curves and all this. And so it went viral because it caused this big debate of like, this is not flattering, but should it even exist? And it's like, well, I think everything should exist. Even if it's not my style, I think it should exist.
Yeah.
I don't like beige, but I'm glad that beige blazers exist for people who like them, right? Everybody needs something that's good for them. So it was just a really interesting conversation that we had back then. And I wonder now if I released that dress, would it cause the same conversation? Probably not. But at the time, it was a really kind of like pivotal moment in conversation in plus size fashion specifically.
Yeah, it's interesting. That is so interesting that a piece that, you know, Oh, yeah, that is just so interesting to me. Yeah, I've been seeing like videos here and there of people just talking about like, well, does flattering even mean? I've heard also other people talking about it from a perspective of like if someone's a little shorter.
Yeah.
Like, all the rules around like, oh, if you're shorter, you should wear this because you don't want to look stout or whatever. And I've always like fed into that a little bit too because I'm 5'4", so I'm just like, well, I got to make sure my legs look long and all this stuff. And it's like, why? Because then am I really gonna like not wear my personal style just to meet this like flattering aspect that like is under that somebody else is making up? So I love that, and I love that if people are getting mad, hopefully that means that people's minds are changing.
Exactly. That's what I always said. Ready to stare is really about like when people are staring, they're thinking. Maybe it's admiration, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's anger, but they're thinking. And when people are thinking and they're staring, like that's when conversation happens, and that's when people's minds can change. I believe that. And that's really where the name came from.
Yeah. So Ready to Stare is the name of your blog, right?
Yes.
And like how long have you had your blog?
So I started Ready to Stare in 2012 as a handmade jewelry and accessory brand.
Right.
And then I started the blog in 2013. And so I was making the products and I was doing the blog posts, and the blog posts were to show you how I would style the pieces that I was designing. And as I was doing that, brands really started to take notice of kind of the way that I engaged with my audience and the way that I talked about products and just my approach to blogging. And so then brands started approaching me being like, we want you to wear our product. And so I would, try to integrate that. And it just got to a point where it just became very clear that as much as I loved designing, it was just taking a lot of time, energy, and financial resources. I was always self-funded, and it was just a lot. And blogging was like right there. It was like, come on, do it. So I kind of had to make a choice to stop doing the designing and to just dive full force into blogging. And so I made that shift. Holiday 2016 was my last collection that I designed. I kept making pieces that I had already designed till 2018, and then I officially shut down my shop in 2018.
Well, it's interesting how sometimes things like they start a certain way, but then it blooms into something else.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this a little bit in the past, but kind of just how I just think it's like so cool how you started. You entered kind of the blog space during like a very interesting time where like blogging was really becoming like, what is this? And kind of entering this like kind of different phase. And now I think it's like a lot more about like Instagram and like the social media and like, but I do want to talk about a little bit. So now your newest project, which is Secondhand Stare, and that's your kind of online shop and pop-up. So please tell me a bit about that, how that started and why it started.
Yeah, so Secondhand Stare is a plus size and modern resale shop. So we are plus size vintage and modern resale shop. We carry sizes large to 7X, and we have a few small, medium, large pieces, but not very many. Our specialty is really 2X and above. And it started because my first business back in 2009 was a vintage store, and it was I was still in college, and my friends and I were like, we realized that there was this market for pop-up vintage stores, and so we created this business. It was called the Sometimes Store. We did pop-up events, and it became really successful. This was like in the wave of when people were really into, again, I'm aging myself, but when people were really into shopping vintage on eBay, but there wasn't a lot of places to buy it online. So I started selling vintage then, and then both my business partners moved to New York, and so then I started Ready to Stare as a jewelry business because I was like, well, if I want to keep running a business, it's a lot easier to cart around some jewelry than it is to carry around a bunch of vintage. So that was kind of my thought at the time. But vintage was always a passion. Like I always said my retirement career would be owning a vintage store. And now twice I'm like, I'm only in my 30s. I don't need to keep doing my retirement career. But something keeps drawing me to it. Obviously, I love it. And so I stopped selling. I always sold some vintage alongside the handmade pieces that I made with Ready to Stare, but I totally stopped doing all of it in 2018. And then people were asking, you know, we love this outfit that you wear. Would you ever sell it? Would you ever sell it? So I started doing closet sales. And so I started doing closet sales of my pieces. And then people were like, well, I really like that, but I'm a 4X. I really like that, but I'm a 1X and I'm a 2X, 3X. So they were like, I want to wear your style of clothing, but I don't wear your size. And then I was like, oh, I could do this. I could just make the Ready to Stare closet sale a business. So we kind of ramped up from doing one every few years to then 2 sales a year. And then last year we did 3 sales a year. And then this year, 2023, in March, we opened Secondhand Stare full time. So instead of being a closet sale, we are a resale shop. Of course, my clothing still ends up in there, but we are a dedicated resale shop focused on larger size clothing, because I know that there is an issue for accessibility, both in price and quality. When you're a size 24 and over, it's very hard to find things in your size that are still stylish. So for me, it's been a passion of mine to kind of find those pieces and help connect them to the person who's looking for it. So
amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, I just was so excited when I saw that you were doing that, and then when I got to see your pop-up at Slow Union, and Olivia's been on the podcast too, and I'm just like, oh, I love when everything just comes together, because really, and I hope that just it keeps growing for you, because that is it really is missing in the vintage world right now. And I think, you know, kind of one of my questions like about like just vintage shopping and how it really has become so popular, like on TikTok and everywhere. And I think especially because it's like, I think it's a way for people to really find their personal unique style. Because if you really want to find something that like not a lot of other people have, at least like in your town, like you go to a vintage store, you find something that really speaks to you. And then on top of that, it's sustainable, you know, and, you know, we are living in, I talk about it a bit more in my last episode with Emily, who knows more about it just in terms of sustainability, how it's killing our planet. So it's just like a lot of people are like, okay, well, I want to shop vintage. But it's like, what do you do when it's like, none of this fits me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think, you know, how can people who like either like make content around vintage or stuff like that, you know, because you are an influencer, so I know you know a lot about that. How can we make sure to always keep a spotlight on the importance of like size inclusivity when it comes to like vintage and secondhand fashion?
Yeah, I think that it's the same issue that plus size fashion has always had, which is it's not as easy for people to find and for people to access. And at the end of the day, like just because it's not as easy to find, that doesn't mean it's not important, and that doesn't mean it's not worth your time. It's there. I have an entire shop, you've seen, full of plus size vintage. It exists. It's just about being mindful and looking for it.
Yeah.
So I think that I would encourage vintage sellers to put more intention into it, and to also not be like, okay, well, I found this one thing, so I have plus size vintage, or like we all know that sizes have changed a lot over the years. So if something says size 14, it's probably like an 8 and then therefore not plus, right? So like try to be mindful about using measurements. And then also the great thing about, and one of the reasons why I love the 80s is oversized was so big. So I have things in my closet that are tagged a size small. I'm a 3X, right? But they're tagged a size small because it's oversized. So I just challenge anyone, whether you're an influencer, you're a store owner, to think about how something could work for a range of bodies, because the size on the tag is not always going to be the only indicator of who it's for. So I think it's if it's not the body that you live in, if you don't live in a plus size body, like there are so many of us who are like ready and willing to help you to understand our experience, because we want to be included and we want to be, you know, seen as someone who has something to say in the fashion conversation, because so often plus size people are just left out, whether it's vintage, whether it's fast fashion, whether it's luxury fashion. We're left out of every level of it, honestly. So I think people like me have been like, I'm left out. I'm just going to create my own path. But we shouldn't have to always create our own path to be included.
It should be everyone.
So it would be nice if you have a store, like look for those pieces. There are some thrift stores, if that's where you find your vintage, that have specific plus size sections, which is amazing, right? So like to me, that's where I want to go if I'm thrifting. And then there's online stores like secondhandstare.com where we have exclusively plus size vintage and plus size secondhand. So I think it's just about knowing where those places are and directing people to it. And it's cool. Again, I'm aging myself, but I've been thrifting since I was like 12 years old. So to hear that like this is something that people are doing on TikTok is like really cool, because I've always gone to vintage stores and I've always thrifted, and that's just always been part of my style, because the options I wanted were never available to me. They were never available in the stores. Nothing was in my size. So I had to get inventive. I started shopping in the men's section of the thrift store just so I could find more that I wanted. And I always loved to wear like oversized like flannels with a belt and then tights. And that was like my look. It was just comfortable for me, and it just worked. So that was something that I always did like when I was growing up. But it's just interesting to hear that this is a growing thing, and I love that from a sustainability perspective. And I hope that it helps make fashion more inclusive for more folks too.
Absolutely. And I like that you encourage people to just look, because I think I've heard like just discussions online. I'm chronically online. But
I love it. Yeah, I'm learning, because I'm like, I thought I was, but we must not be on the same side of TikTok, and that's okay.
I'm just like, I've just been, I guess maybe I'm just on it so much where I'm like, I swipe past whatever, I'm like in a certain niche. But anyway, like I've just been seeing like discussions around like, vintage sellers being asked like, hey, like, do you have your size inclusivity could be better? I really like this stuff, but blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people respond, well, this is all I could find and blah, blah, blah. But I think I really like that you used like a specific example about the 80s, because that's so true. And there is plenty of things still. I mean, thrift stores are definitely changing in terms of like what's there, but like there's still stuff available. It's just a matter of kind of
exists.
It's just like, yes, and changing your perspective.
I'm swimming in it. It exists. I mean, I love those 80s sequin shirts. And I had one at my pop-up that's a 7X. Yeah. Now, the tag says 7X. I haven't done the measurements to know what size it really fits, but my guess is that it's probably going to fit a 4X, 5X, right? Yeah. So I think this is probably a one size poncho, but it fits me, So again, I think it's about looking. You have to look for it, and you have to know that it's going to take time. Like I know for me, I know how really well to find femme gaudy clothes. That's my personal style. But now that I run a shop, I have to look for other aesthetics as well. And so I heard from my customers, like, we want more masculine styles. So I went on the hunt to find like big and tall and plus size friendly, like masculine styles. And it was hard because I'm not used to it, but I did it, right? Like I forced myself to get out of my comfort zone and look. I made my girlfriend model it. It was fun, and people loved it. Aww. And now when I'm looking, I'm not only looking for those pieces that are my style, that are a size range that I like for the women's pieces, but now I'm looking for masculine pieces as well. So I think it's just about how much time do you want to. Sourcing is, I think, the most important part of running a vintage store, having a clear aesthetic, but also having clear mission and values. My mission and my value of Secondhand Stare is that we prioritize larger sizes. And while not everything that we carry is vintage, everything that we carry is good quality, stylish stuff that is secondhand, that needs a new home. And then we aim to keep everything under $40, which is really hard. But, some of our higher end vintage pieces are not. But for the most part, everything on our site is under $40. And it's to keep things accessible as they can be, so that money is not necessarily limiting you from the wardrobe that you want, because I don't believe money or your size or anything should limit you. I think you should be able to dress the way that you want to dress.
Absolutely. And that's another big problem, like even not in like the vintage, not just the vintage world, but just like the fashion world in general. I feel like there was a point in time when I know when I was on, I started on Instagram, like, I was really getting into Instagram like when I was in college, and I was very much like getting interested in like the sustainable fashion side of Instagram. And a lot of people were saying like, oh, there's all these new sustainable brands popping up, like, you know, like Everlane and all these like cool brands, and everybody was doing that. But people started like pointing things out like, okay, these are sustainable brands. They're made, you know, recyclable materials. They're not fast fashion, but there aren't extended sizes.
Nope.
So then people, and I then heard this from like my plus size friends, and people, you know, of larger sizes would say like, well, I have no choice but to just, you know, go to a fast fashion site. And then like there was, you know, there's been so many discussions around like, well, we shouldn't, you know, like a lot of people are like very strict about like, you know, I don't shop fast fashion. And it's like, that's great.
That's a privilege.
That is a privilege. Yeah. Because you're able to avoid it, and okay, fine. And then the other thing, like what made me think of this was that you mentioned the price range. A lot of these sustainable brands, not only do they not have extended sizing, but if they do occasionally, they're also like very expensive.
Extremely, yeah.
Which makes sense. Okay, they're higher quality, but it's just like, how do we meet that equilibrium and stuff? So I think, yeah, I just think it's like a very important discussion to have, especially when it comes, you know, in terms of availability of like, okay, which group of people have this availability for certain clothes and which don't? What people can fit into these like sustainable clothes, and which people don't have a choice, you know?
And it kind of goes back to this idea of who's the desirable customer.
Yeah.
And the desirable customer is not plus size. And that says something about our society and how our society looks at larger bodied people. And that's a whole thing in itself, right? But it's very interesting to me, that the clothing that is seen as more disposable is the clothing that's catered to us. So, I mean, we could go on all day about this, but yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. And I think that secondhand is probably the easiest way to shop sustainably as a plus size person, because there really is not that many reasonably priced sustainable brands. Not yet. I hope there will be.
Yeah. I hope the shift is coming. And yeah, I think that is really the power of like, you know, secondhand shopping, and also just like knowing and just hearing your perspective on how you source items and how it does take time and how you have to change your perspective, you know. I think that is just like such a good message to have, because like I think it does, you know, all the, you know, vintage sellers are treasure hunters at the end of the day.
Exactly.
But it's like you got to just adjust your like, you know, dial a little bit and you'll find more variety. So I love that. I think that's just like a really good reminder for people to think about when it comes to vintage style. And so then speaking of vintage style, I would love to hear what are some of your favorite vintage pieces at the moment that you're like reaching towards, or I guess just like either tell me like what are some of your just like favorites of all time, I guess, if you want.
Yeah, wow.
But that's a hard question.
That is a hard question.
Or anything that's like that comes to your mind first.
Yeah, I think for me, like what I consider to be a unicorn is like those gaudy, fully beaded sequin tops.
Yeah.
And those in plus is a unicorn. I don't care how many I already have. Every single plus size one, I buy it. And I just think that it's representative of such a craftsmanship that you will just not find ever in fast fashion. No one is hand beating. And if they are, they're definitely not being paid fairly to do it. No one is hand beating those tops anymore. And so for me, it's always about, okay, how can I style this so it fits my current style? So, you know, we have one of the tops on secondhand stare right now, and we tucked it into like a pair of high-waisted pants, wide leg pants. And it felt very modern, right? Like, because it's easy when there's shoulder pads for it to feel dated. But I think for me, vintage is so timeless that it's really about like, maybe this time I'd wear it like probably in my college years, I would have found a long one and wore it with tights, right? And a belt. That's what I would have done. That was my aesthetic. But now maybe I'm going to wear it tucked into high-waisted pants and something. So it's like, for me, it's kind of like those pieces are timeless. I'm always going to wear gaudy sequin sweaters and beaded tops. That's always going to be me. It just reminds me of like my mom growing up, and that just, she had this one like long beaded 80s dress and clip-on earrings with the, you know, sequins and the beads. And so I just remember that. And so it's very nostalgic for me. And so even though I don't have that dress, I wouldn't have fit in it even if she did still have it. I kind of like look for that. I'm always looking for those kind of statement pieces. And then rather than getting rid of them, I'm styling them in new ways as my style is evolving or my style is changing.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point, how like we're sometimes told to like view certain pieces as like, okay, these are only trendy during this you know, certain years. And it's like, it's totally normal for your style to change, whether it's influenced by trends or not. But it's like, it's all about just like taking that piece and being like, do you still like it? Like, here's how, like, think of ways to like apply it to your current self.
Yeah. There are certain pieces where I'm like, I don't care if that's not my style right now. I'll never find it again. So I'm keeping it no matter what, you know?
I have pieces like that too. I'm like, I'm never letting you go. And a lot of times, see, the beauty of just like keeping them around is then like in a couple years, I then look at that piece differently and I'm like, I might bring this back out, you know? I've had a lot of experiences like that as well. Okay, so we chatted a bit about your personal style, but I guess... Are there any, like, we talked a bit about how you like source the shop, but in terms of like sourcing your own wardrobe, what are kind of like either some shopping tips or philosophies that you kind of live by? I like to always ask everyone this because everyone has kind of like different, you know, places they shop or based on their own lifestyle. And, you know, I would love to hear how kind of your process is.
Yeah, I wish I had an easy to describe process, but I do feel strongly that like my personal style is something that is so innate to me as a human being that I could never even describe to somebody else how to do it because it was the first thing I ever felt confident about. It was just the first thing. I was 8 years old and I was like, I knew I could dress. I didn't know, I had no sense of self at all, but I knew I could dress like before anything else. And so for me, it's just always been something that felt so natural. And so for me, it's kind of just having a vision, seeing something and having a vision and being like, I can make that work. And me and my best friend have a joke because I'll like something and then 3 years later, she'll be like, yeah, I'm wearing that now. And I'm like, exactly. Like, exactly. 3 years later, I'm like too far ahead for you. But because I don't really do trends, it doesn't really matter. But it's just funny because it's often like something that other people will look at and be like, that looks wild. 3 years later, it'll be in style. So it's just kind of about having this creative vision. So when I'm shopping for myself, I'm always thinking bright colors, patterns, but then there's certain colors that I just avoid because they just don't feel like me. Like I don't do anything beige really. I don't wear white a lot, navy. Oh, I don't wear brown, but I'll wear black, but it'll have to be paired with like something else. It'll have to be a really interesting texture. So I love like, I look for things with movement. So when I saw you on Saturday, I had fringe pants on, like those were black, but like they had a lot of movement. I love like pleather, anything that's like textured. To me, you could be wearing an all black look, but it won't be boring because it's textures. So
I always say that too.
Yep. Like I love anything like fuzzy, furry, like I just, to me, your style should be fun. And so for me, I'm kind of like, if it doesn't feel fun and it doesn't like light me up, it doesn't feel like me.
I love that. And any like, I guess, big changes that you've noticed in your style? Like this, I mean, it seems like it has stayed consistent for a while. And it is amazing feeling when I think as we get older, it just kind of becomes more and more consistent. And that's a good feeling because I feel like I was going through so many identity crises like in like high school and college, like what's my style? But then like as I got older, I was like, okay, it's getting cemented in a little bit. But I guess any like I don't know, I always like to ask like any big changes or evolutions that have happened in the last like several years that you've noted that have just kind of changed your style from before?
I think I've never cared what people think when it comes to what I wear. So that has been really consistent and helpful because that outside noise I think can contribute a lot to us hiding ourselves or suppressing our style. And so that has been my like guiding light is just like, wear what you want, dress your body how it feels good to you. And so that has been my guiding light. And I think anytime that my style has changed, it's kind of veered away from that guiding light of when I was like, oh, well, maybe I should dress this way because it's more palatable to people, or, you know, this is what's trendy, you know, nobody's wearing skinny jeans anymore, you can't wear that anymore, you know, like anytime I like listen to that, I veer from my vision and my truth, which is to just wear what feels good. Like, really, who cares what anybody else says? Like, you know, so I think what has felt best is just kind of all the times that I've learned to tune those voices out and just be consistent and stick to, you know, if I want to wear the 80s sweater, I'm just going to wear it. Like, it doesn't matter that's not trendy right now, because somebody somewhere will appreciate it. And if they don't, that's fine, because I appreciate it, right? That's really all that matters at the end of the day. So I think, I don't think I think my style is still super gaudy. I've been using that word to describe my style since I was a teenager, and it still feels and rings really true. If anything, I guess I feel like I've gotten a better understanding of how to work with color, and I think that's really it. I don't know. I don't feel like I don't want to say it hasn't evolved, but I think it's been consistent, which is great.
I love that.
Yeah, as someone with a very inconsistent career, being an influencer is like very sometimes you have a lot of work and sometimes you don't, and it's very up and down. I have no stability in like my business life, so for me, my style being like this is like actually great.
And that's good. That's your guiding light. That's your like true north. And
exactly.
I love that so much, because I think that it's better for your style to feel like your anchor, you know, that you can like come back to and be like, okay, this is who I am. Because like life will throw you so many like ups and downs, like emotionally, relationships, yada yada. But I think like having that ability to express yourself and like come back to it is amazing, and that's my goal. So I just like I love that you've gotten there. And then I want to touch a little bit then just about being online, because I think, you know, I always love I'm always fascinated by like the internet and social media, and also its relationship to fashion, because it's like, you know, it feels like, you know, at one point we were maybe not me specifically, but people were posting outfits on MySpace and stuff, and now like where have we gotten where it's like TikTok videos and all that. So, you know, you've been blogging for quite a little while, and you've been in the influencer game. Like, what are some of kind of like your biggest takeaways with from when you started to now, like how the internet world has treated you?
A lot has changed over the years. When I started Ready to Stare in 2012, I started the @Ready to Stare Instagram as my business page, but it quickly evolved when a friend told me, you know, you're your biggest customer, put yourself in front of your audience and share your outfits. And so that's how I kind of became the face of my business, and then that's what led to me being an influencer. So I think this idea of being genuine and being authentic, that is something that has really evolved. And that was very new at that point. We still kind of, the norm was still aspirational beauty, which was very much about like, this is how we're supposed to look. This is how we all should be aspiring to look. And kind of social media allowed us to say, no, I don't look like that person, and that's fine. I look like me and I'm great. And so I was really part of that first wave. Now, granted, there are plus size bloggers who started in 2008. So I'm not the very first by any means, but I was in the first wave of it. And, and kind of being part of changing this narrative that like, no, like we don't accept that that's the standard of beauty. We don't accept that that's who's considered fashionable. Like, we have something to say. We're here, and this is our platform, and we're making you stare. We're making you see us. So that has been really great. And it's been great to see that evolution now with TikTok. Because again, I was a picture person. I was a blogger. I was literally like this. Yeah, we used to literally go out and take pictures of our outfit, and then you would put like 7 to 10 pictures on a blog post, and it would just be about that one outfit. Can you imagine? That's like not how we do things at all anymore, but that's what it was like. And people would go to your blog to see your new outfit, and they would, you know, buy the pieces. And so, yeah, it's definitely different now, because then we went from this being authentic to then being really polished and being really aesthetic on Instagram. And that was a big shift from me, because I went from being able to post a mirror selfie of my outfit and that gets so many likes, to then feeling like I had to work with a professional photographer all the time. And then TikTok came, and then we went back to authenticity, and we swung even more. And now it's like, it's been a hard shift for me as a creator to go back to this idea of like, you can take a mirror selfie, you can make a video wherever you are, and it doesn't have to be super polished. That's hard, because then, you know, I really like, 2016 is when I made my hard pivot. That was really like the Instagram era of being aesthetic and being polished. And so now it's been a tough mind shift, but I think, if there's anything I've learned from my 10 plus years as a creator, which again is one of it's a new career. It didn't exist. So there's not too many people that other than like the early YouTube days, there's not many of us that have been doing it 10 plus, 20 plus. This just doesn't happen. So I think I've learned that you have to be adaptable. You cannot hold on to the way that things were, even if you liked it better that way. You have to be able to adapt. And if you don't adapt, you will fall off. And it's a hard pill to swallow. So, I remember when the day I heard about Reels, I was like, okay, I'm making a Reel. This is it. And it became my whole Instagram strategy. I love photos. I still love photos, but if you want your content to be able to be seen and resonate with people, you have to adapt. And so I learned to do video. I still love photos, but video is fun too. So I think, just be able to be adaptable, be consistent, and just be yourself. Like, I think trying to be somebody else, I mean, whether it's my style or in business or as an influencer, trying to be somebody else are the times where I failed the most. So
I love all of that, because I think that is such an interesting insight, because you are exactly right that it just went like ping ponged, like, okay, now we got to be really polished. No, now we're going to be really authentic. No, no, you can't. I think sometimes my least favorite thing about like kind of, because I create content on TikTok too, and I really, I am good at doing like off the cuff stuff, but then I do like to put effort into things,
I hate to say it, but I love putting effort in. I love when it's polished. Like, and again, because I started doing Reels, I did some TikToks, but I started doing Reels, and Reels came out at the time where transitions were really popular on TikTok. So transitions became really popular on Reels. And then it's like now, transitions are out. No one's using transitions. It's like, I just mastered transitions. And you're like, it's a whole like, oh my God. It's like, it's so frustrating sometimes, because you're like, I just want to like tell this story. At the end of the day, being an influencer is about telling a story, whether I'm helping share somebody else's story, a brand story, my own story, I'm telling a story. So I have to adapt, because I have to figure out how the story is going to be best received. But it is frustrating when you're like, sometimes I just want to write a 1,000-word blog post and tell you what it is, but I can't. I have to make this story fit into 15 seconds. That's hard.
Yeah, things move fast, and it can be frustrating, but honestly, like, who knows? Like, before you know it, like, photos are gonna be back, and videos are gonna be lame.
I know. I see people taking photos with point and shoot Canon cameras. I'm like, little did you know, when I studied abroad in 2008, that was the only camera that I had, and then we would upload all the pictures to Facebook and a whole album,
separate album.
Yeah. So it's like, it's funny that that's like back, like digital looking, but they're taking on their iPhones, but they look digital or whatever. It's just funny. I'm like, everything comes back around, which is the same with style, which is why I was like, don't ever talk poorly about some style, because it'll be back before you know it.
It will.
Yeah.
And I guess just like the last question I'll ask in kind of on the same topic, just about, I feel like, the biggest advice a lot of people are saying in terms of like, if you're a creator online, is to just kind of know your audience, because at the end of the day, the algorithms can really kick your ass, unfortunately, like not show you anything. So it's really important to get like almost like find your community or your niche of people. And I feel like you've really done that. Like, I think you like have like a, you've you have such a presence where I think you have like a community and an audience. What are some of your like advice on like how to kind of create an authentic audience or relationship with your audience online? And yeah, what are your kind of like, do you have any like advice on that?
Yeah. So my advice for creating an authentic audience online is having conversations. At the end of the day, like I never call people that follow me my followers, because it feels like a power imbalance. And I feel like it's more of my community, because I would be just talking to no one if they weren't there to like listen and provide feedback and comment and let me know what they want to see. So I think it's really about like really looking at your audience as if you look at being an influencer as being a business, your audience is also your client, and you need to look at like, am I serving them like what they are looking for? And now I also don't completely let my audience and my community like completely control what I do, because then I'd be veering away from myself. So it's this, and I've done that before. Mm-hmm. It's this total balance of what is sustainable for my creativity and for my business, because this is a business. I have to make money doing this. What is sustainable for me, and what is my community looking for? Mm-hmm. And trying to balance that constantly. But I think when you completely just if you are making a video because you hope it goes viral, that is not the way to be a creator long term. Like I said, I've been doing this 10 plus years, and I've had a handful of viral moments, and to me, that brought a lot of vitriol and terrible comments, people telling me to kill myself. It was honestly terrible for my mental health, because when I'm mostly talking to my community, we're like this. Yeah. They know me, I know them. I kind of know how content is going to be received by my community. But when you go viral, you are opening up yourself to the world who will just make a snap judgment based on something so silly, like the way you pronounce. Like I had a friend that went viral because she mispronounced Cuyahoga, which is funny. She's not from here. This is like a very specific Cleveland joke, right? So she mispronounced it, and then everybody was like, I don't know if they were trolling her, but it went viral because people were correcting her.
Sure.
And it's like something so silly like that. And it's like they're not even focusing on the actual great content that she created, you know? So to me, it's like, I think it's really important to remember that going viral, while it may help grow your followers, it shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be to create a long-lasting, sustainable community of people who engage with your content because they believe in what you do. That's the goal. Going viral is not the goal.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I think that's exactly how I have felt as well. And I'm just like, it's just at the end of the day, if you can like, you have people you can like check in with that feel the same way as you, and you can inspire them and they can inspire you. It's like, that's the best part of the internet,
right?
Amidst like the other scary, horrible parts.
So many of my closest friends are people I met on the internet at this point. So I, you know, as an influencer, you don't have coworkers, right? So your coworkers are other creators who do the same thing as you. And I always say like community over competition. Like, let's talk about where your challenges are and how I can help you. Let me make a referral to you, if like, you know. So it's like, I think it's really about, if you look at online as a community, it can be really powerful, but like also like, you know, when you need to check out, because it can also be really toxic.
Absolutely. Oh, that's amazing advice. Thank you so much. Well, I think that's our time there. I think we talked about a lot, and thank you so much for coming on. I feel like you just have such incredible advice and input on everything. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.